Yo, what's going on, YouTube family? It's your man Jeremy Doodoo here. And in this video, I want to talk about the issue that I have with design processes and design thinking methodologies. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I think in UX design boot camps or university settings, they're teaching you a certain way of how you should approach your personal design projects. And you might have the expectation that when you get into the real world and get your first gig as a UX designer, this is how you can work. Based off of what I learned in school, I'm ready to do surgery, baby. And then you get hit with this reality that you're working with stakeholders or you're working with a company that operates totally differently from how you were taught how designers should work. And recently, what drove me to want to talk about this is that one of my YouTube followers reached out to me and he said that a couple years ago he got his first job as a UX designer here at LA at a startup. And while he was on the job, there weren't many people there. I think it was like under 10 people. And he wanted to reach out to their customers to understand their pain points so he can understand what kind of solutions would bring value to their lives. But the team that he worked on didn't value research. And they wanted him to create ideas based off of the assumptions that they had. So he would get an idea from somebody on the team, from somebody in a leadership position. They made him execute on certain ideas, and he felt like those ideas were not valuable to the customers who were using their product. So he parted ways with the company because they had two different philosophies. And I told him that this is a common thing that happens in the industry because people are still trying to understand how designers work and how designers could bring value to the products that they build, right? So I wanted to create this video to show you guys, this is how you might be taught in school, but there's a certain reality that you'll face when you get into a job, and you have to be flexible enough to understand the people that you're going to work with, right? In order to build out the ideas that you have. So let's go through this screenshot real quick. So what the Stanford D School recommends is that there's 5 stages when you're building out a product, and this is the design thinking methodology that they recommend, right? So you empathize with users and you understand their pain points. You understand how they use certain products today. And then after you do that, you synthesize all the information and insights that you get, and you're coming up with your own point of view on how you think you could approach solving for those pain points, right? And in order to do that, the first step is that you ideate a lot of different solutions and concepts that you think could solve for those pain points, right? And then you get into prototyping, and you might do that in a low fidelity prototype. You might do it in a high fidelity prototype where you build stuff out in Adobe XD, in Principle or Figma, and then you test out those ideas with maybe some of the users that you initially had some user interviews with, right? And this is, I'm not saying that anything is wrong with this, but what I'm saying is that you might get into a job where they don't value prototyping or they don't value doing user interviews, right? And you have to be flexible enough to work in those types of environments. And if it's not something for you, you understand that it's time to move on. But this is just a common thing that happens in the industry. And I have my own personal approach that you guys are lucky to see. And I thought about it over the past couple months. And, this isn't an approach that Harvard has. They haven't given me my golden sticker yet, but hopefully in the next few years, they do. But my approach and my framework is all based on compassion and love. And you might be like, yo, Jeremy, that's some hippy dippy shit. I don't understand what you talking about, but let's get into it. Right. So I think that in order to build a great product, the foundation of that product is putting the people first in that organization that you work with. And there's four pillars in this pyramid, right? And like I said, this is not something that I learned from anybody or taught by any school that's out there. This is what I learned through failure and experience, right? I've learned that when you don't involve key decision makers in your process, when you're a designer, that somebody could come in at the last minute and just throw off your entire design, and it throws off the entire team. So then it leads to a lot of inefficiencies when you're working on a project. Like, say for instance you had a deadline to complete a project within the next 4 months. If somebody comes in at the last minute and they're like, hey, I had this cool idea, and now it just affects every little piece of what you designed, and all the conversations that you've had with developers, it could affect everybody, right? And it might take a lot longer to come up with an idea that you guys can execute on. So enough of that. Let's get into this process, right? So I think that the first step of my framework is that I like to connect with the individuals who I'm going to work with and who I'm building for, right? If I can't do that, if I can't reach out to potential users who might use the product, I at least try to get a point of view of each person that I'm working with, right? So I'll be proactive. I have, some notes here. I'll be proactive and reach out to the people who I need to partner with on a project. It could be a PM, it could be an engineer, it could be an executive, but I try to understand their point of view when it comes to design. How do they view success? How do they view failure when it comes to design? And I try to look at the world through their eyes, based off of their past experiences working with other designers and the products that they like and enjoy that they use, right? But my main goal in the beginning of the project is to open that door to collaboration, because the sooner that I do that, the more informed I could be about how I could approach the entire project and how I can involve them, right? Some people like to use Slack messages to go back and forth. Other people like to have meetings. So I try to really connect with those people that I'm going to work with first. And that's the most important thing to me when I work on a project, right? And if I can reach out to the people that I'm going to build for, then I try to do as many user research interviews to understand their point of view and how they use products in the world. But that's not always the case, right? And when I lead my team, I try to understand their pain, their motivation, what inspires them when they're working on a project. And I'm always trying to acknowledge their truths, because that's something that you cannot change. No matter how much you think a project should how you should work on a project, they have their own ideology, right? And when I understand the ideas that they have or what they think is cool on the market, then I can incorporate some of that feedback and some of those insights into the concepts that I create, right? So I'm translating those visions that they have in their head onto a piece of paper, and I'm wireframing out those ideas. And when I show those people who I work with, like, hey, I think your idea is pretty cool. This is how I see it, and this is how I see it working in our product. Then those people that I work with feel like I'm empathizing with them, right? And I'm validating their ideas. And if I can user test those ideas, I do that. But I think mainly what I'm trying to do is facilitate conversations with those people that I work with and helping them see, this is the story that I've heard from you, and this is the vision that I see that we can create based off of the conversations that I've had with all these different people, right? And I feel like what that does is that it starts to create a cohesive narrative with the people that I'm working with. So they're starting to see, this is an idea that I had in my mind. Jeremy formed an opinion based off of that, because he's the expert on the UX. And now I can form a deeper connection with that person, because I'm not going off on my own and saying, this is what I think the design should be. and now it's based off of my opinion and your opinion, right? That's where designers get jacked up. And then what I think that that does is that it inspires the team because they feel a part of the design process. And sometimes for some people, that feels a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because they're like, oh, I don't know how to draw. I'm not creative. And these could be engineers, it could be PMs. And oftentimes they have never worked with the designer who involves them in a design process, right? And so that can be an uncomfortable feeling for some folks, which is totally understandable. But I think after you incorporate all those different opinions, you start to align on a vision that's actually feasible, right? And sometimes there may be compromises to what you get designed, right? But based off of everything that you've heard and the insights that you've gained from the team, you could stay encouraged. You always have to stay encouraged as a designer, and you have to encourage your team to do the same, right? So you might come up with a North Star vision to keep people, like aligned, like this is where we're trying to go, and this is the first step of how we can get there, right? And what I think that this framework does is that it leads to less revisions, more decisions, and better business outcomes. And the reason that I think this is because on my past projects, I think that the main challenge has never been UI design. The main challenge has always been the people who I'm working with, right? And you could ask any designer in the industry, I think that they will say, a similar opinion. It could be the complexity of a project, but I think it's also the complexity of working with many different personality types and being able to be flexible to all those different opinions and just cutting out the noise and forming a vision that everybody can align on. That's a challenging part of being a designer. So yeah, I hope that this video really helps you understand that, let me just reiterate that you might be taught a certain way to approach design projects when you're working on a personal project, but that's not always going to work when you are working with many different people with completely different viewpoints, right? So what I hope that you can take from this video is that you as an individual designer have to be flexible enough to understand how to work with various different stakeholders. And the main thing that I hope that you could take from this video is that you have to be adaptable to the certain environment that you're working in as a designer, because all companies operate differently. Every team that I've worked on operates differently. Every individual that you work with as a designer is going to think differently. So how can you be like water, right? How can you be like water and fluid enough to adapt to any kind of situation in order to be successful on your design projects, right? And the more you understand yourself and you can be self-aware of your strengths and what might piss you off if somebody says something, the better that you can work as a designer, because you can separate people's opinions from how you work. If this video helped you out, which I hope it did, I think that this is gold personally. If it changed your mind a little bit, you already know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.